Jinwoo was about to head upstairs when the lobby doors swung open and Jimchul rushed in, spotting him immediately. "Hunter Sung," Jimchul called out, hurrying over with visible concern. "We've been trying to reach you all day. Your phone's been off." Jinwoo, his exhaustion still heavy on his shoulders, replied calmly. "I was in a place where calls couldn't reach." Jimchul hesitated, then asked, "Did you meet Yu Jinho?" That caught Jinwoo off guard. "What do you mean?" he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. Jimchul explained that Jinho had left earlier, saying he was heading to meet Jinwoo at the Hunter's Bureau after receiving a message, apparently from Jinwoo himself. Jinwoo's expression hardened. "That's impossible," he said. "I never sent him any message. I just came from the bureau." Adam, who had been listening nearby, checked the visitor logs at once. "Jinho's name isn't there," he confirmed grimly. "But I did see something strange earlier. A hunter from the Scavenger Guild picked Jinho up about 2 hours ago." Jinwoo's gaze turned cold. The Scavenger Guild had connections to the bureau, but they had no authority to act in its name. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Let's contact them directly," Adam said quickly, pulling out his phone. As he spoke with the guild, his tone grew tense. At the Scavenger Guild headquarters, Laura took the call. Her expression shifted the instant she realized what Adam was saying. Someone from her guild had taken Yu Jinho, the vice guild master of a Jin guild, under false pretenses. Shock rippled through her. "Does Hunter Sung Jinwoo know about this?" she asked sharply. "Not yet," Adam replied. "He just found out that Jinho's missing." Laura didn't waste another second. "I'll look into it immediately," she promised, already issuing internal commands. Adam hung up and turned to tell Jinwoo that the Scavenger Guild was investigating. But when he looked up, Jinwoo was gone. The air still trembled faintly where he had been standing. Sung Jinwoo was already moving, fast, silent, and furious. Whoever had dared touch Yu Jinho had made the gravest mistake imaginable. Leaping to the top of a nearby building, Jinwoo's thoughts spiraled with frustration and dread. How could he have been so careless? He should have known better than to leave Jinho unguarded, especially after the recent events surrounding President Myung-han. The memory of the attack at Gina's school flickered vividly in his mind, a grim reminder of how danger could strike without warning. Fear tightened his chest. Jinho was more than just his guild's vice leader. He was family. If anything happened to him, Jinwoo clenched his fists, refusing to finish that thought. Without hesitation, his command rang out like a roar across the shadows. "Find him." Thousands of shadow soldiers burst from beneath his feet, flooding the city like an ocean of darkness. They scattered in every direction, each one attuned to the faintest trace of Jinho's mana signature. It was only a matter of time before they found something. Meanwhile, across the city, Thomas Andre stepped into the Scavenger Guild's condo. The sight that greeted him stopped him cold. Hunters, his own men, lay sprawled across the floor, unconscious. The walls bore the marks of a brief but violent struggle. But Huang Dong-su was gone. Thomas's jaw tightened. Slowly, he removed his trademark sunglasses, his movements deliberate, almost calm. Then, with a sharp snap, he crushed them in his fist, shards scattering onto the marble floor. Beneath that composed exterior, fury burned like fire. Dong-su had crossed the line. Grinding his teeth, Thomas turned toward the few hunters still standing. His voice was cold, low, and deadly serious. "Find him. Now, before Sung Jinwoo does." There was no time to waste. If Jinwoo reached Dong-su first, there would be no coming back from what followed. High above, Jinwoo stood on the rooftop, scanning the sprawling cityscape below. His heightened perception sharpened every detail. The flicker of streetlights, the hum of traffic, the distant chatter of pedestrians, even the faint echo of water running in unseen apartments. Amid that chaos, his focus was razor-sharp. Could Jinho have been taken out of the city? Unlikely. A D-rank combat hunter like Jinho wouldn't go quietly. If the car meant to take him to the Hunter Bureau had changed course, he would have noticed. He would have fought back. Then one name cut through Jinwoo's thoughts like a blade: Huang Dong-su. The pieces began to fall into place. Dong-su had been waiting for this, waiting for Jinho to come to America. He wanted answers about the death of his brother, Huang Dong-suk. And in his rage, he'd gone after the only survivor who could tell him what happened. Wu Jinchul's old warning echoed in Jinwoo's mind, chillingly clear. It had come true. Jinwoo's expression darkened, his eyes glowing faintly with murderous intent. He didn't regret what happened in that dungeon, but if he had kept someone watching over Jinho, this might have been avoided. Now, someone would pay the price. The thought of something happening to Jinho ignited a fierce intensity in Jinwoo's eyes. The possibility alone was enough to make his blood run cold. Huang Dong-su had gone too far, crossing a line that could never be uncrossed, and now, the entire scavenger guild was on high alert. The tension was thick, every member waiting anxiously for any scrap of information. Thomas Andre sat in silence, his massive frame tense as his mind churned. He couldn't understand what Dong-su was thinking. Was he really unafraid of death? No, Thomas knew him too well for that. Dong-su was reckless, but not suicidal. As an S-rank hunter, he understood the enormous gulf between his power and Sung Jinwoo's. If he still chose to provoke Jinwoo, it could only mean one thing. He was relying on Thomas to shield him from the fallout. Thomas clenched his jaw. Maybe I've been too lenient with him, he thought grimly. The sharp ring of his phone cut through the silence. He answered immediately. Master Thomas. Laura's voice came through, strained but composed. I've just received new information. With the Hunter Bureau's help, we tracked Dong-su's movements for the past month. He's deviated from his normal routes 3 times, same locations each time. Thomas was on his feet before she even finished. Send me those locations. Mobilize everyone available. I'll move myself. As he was about to hang up, he hesitated. How did you convince the Bureau to cooperate that fast? Laura's reply was quiet but firm. I told them the truth, that if we don't find Dong-su soon, there will be a confrontation between you and Sung Jinwoo. Thomas said nothing, but the weight of her words sank in. Meanwhile, across the guild headquarters, Adam relayed the update. Every scavenger guild member was now being mobilized. All raids had been suspended. Connor, hearing the announcement, froze. The entire guild, Thomas Andre's guild, was moving. That meant only one thing. Thomas himself was personally involved. Something catastrophic was brewing. In a forgotten factory on the outskirts of the city, a man stood nervously beside an unconscious Jinho. The young vice guild master lay motionless on the cold concrete, his body bruised and bloodied. The man's voice trembled as he turned to the figure standing nearby. Are you sure this is okay, Mr. Huang? He's in bad shape. Dong-su's expression was flat, almost detached. He's not going to die, he said calmly. I just need him to talk. Thomas's warnings echoed faintly in his memory, but Dong-su brushed them aside. He didn't plan to kill Jinho. He didn't even plan to touch Jinwoo. All he wanted were answers. Answers about what really happened in that dungeon where his brother, Huang Dong-suk, had died. If Jinho confirmed that Sung Jinwoo was responsible, he would release him. Simple. Or so he told himself. When Jinho didn't stir, Dong-su slapped him hard across the face. Still nothing. His patience snapped, and he drove a brutal punch into Jinho's ribs. The impact forced a strangled cry from Jinho as blood splattered across the floor. A healer standing in the shadows let out a low whistle. He's tough. Anyone else would have died from that by now. Jinho's strength as a tanker was undeniable, but Dong-su wasn't impressed. He scowled, gripping Jinho by the hair and jerking his head up. You really don't know when to give up, do you? He muttered coldly. Jinho's head lolled weakly, his breath ragged. He looked barely conscious. Behind Dong-su, the healer smirked faintly, his hands glowing with a soft green light. He would heal Jinho just enough to keep him alive, to make sure the cycle of pain never ended. It was the perfect setup for endless torture. Dong-su's gaze swept across the decrepit factory. The place had been abandoned for years. Isolated, silent, cut off from the world. No one would hear Jinho's screams here. Now, Dong-su said, his tone ice cold. Are you ready to talk? Jinho's lips trembled, his voice barely a whisper. Dong-su leaned in to catch the words. And then, despite the blood and pain, Jinho managed a faint, defiant smirk. Go to hell. He lifted a trembling hand and gave Dong-su his middle finger. For a moment, Dong-su froze. Then rage exploded across his face. He slammed Jinho's head into the concrete with a sickening crack. The sound echoed through the factory as Jinho went limp once again. Damn it, Dong-su, the concerned man shouted, panic creeping into his voice. You'll kill him. You really want to deal with the fallout of a murder. Dong-su barely acknowledged him. Relax, he muttered, his tone eerily calm. I'll keep him alive. Another man, standing near the door, looked sick with guilt. Enough, man. You've made your point. Let's stop this before it's too late. Dong-su turned, a cruel smile twisting his lips. Too late. He chuckled darkly. I'm just getting started. And then, he froze. Something had moved in the shadows beyond the factory floor. A massive figure loomed there, armor black as night, eyes burning with a cold, predatory light. Dong-su's brow furrowed in confusion. A high orc? He thought, stunned. Did a dungeon break happen nearby? But as the figure stepped closer, silent and menacing, Dong-su's confusion turned to dread. This was no random monster.
News broadcasts filled the living room, each headline more troubling than the last. Disasters, dungeon breaks, monster sightings. The world was unraveling. Kyung-hee sat tensely, eyes locked on the screen. Her voice trembled slightly as she whispered, I wonder how Jinwoo is doing in all this. From the shadows, Beru watched her closely. Though silent, he heard the concern in her voice, and silently he made a vow. If there is anything our king cannot handle, then nothing in this world deserves to exist. His loyalty was absolute. The screen shifted. A live feed from an international conference organized by the US Hunter Bureau took over. Kyung-hee pointed, excitement breaking through her worry. Look, that's your brother. Gina's eyes lit up. She leaned closer, watching Jinwoo's image appear on the broadcast. At the same moment, Beru's gaze softened. His king stood tall among the world's leaders, and admiration shone in his eyes. Then suddenly, Beru's body stiffened. A strange, familiar sensation washed over him, not physical, but primal. His mandibles clicked with unease. He had only felt this once before. The king is angry. A deep, seething fury surged from far away, echoing through Beru's core like a warning bell. Something had happened. Meanwhile, in Busan, the Knights Guild was prepping for their raid. Guild Master Baek Jong-soo stood before his hunters, his voice steady and commanding. Be careful out there. Accidents in dungeons are rising. I want 0 casualties today. A unified shout echoed back, full of confidence. But Yun Tae-hee looked unsettled. Suddenly, his eyes widened. Wait, look! Jong-soo turned, surprised by his outburst. The shadows, beneath your feet, they're moving, Yun Tae said, voice trembling. Jong-soo blinked. Yun Tae, are you drunk again? I warned you about drinking before raids. I'm not drunk, Yun Tae snapped, desperate. I saw it, they were alive. Despite his insistence, Jong-soo shook his head. You're sitting this one out. But Yun Tae wasn't done. He reached for Jong-soo's arm, his voice urgent. Something's wrong. You have to believe me. Elsewhere, Thomas Andre felt it too. Riding in a government car, he suddenly shouted, Stop the car. The driver hesitated, confused. Sir, we're almost there. Crack. The door exploded off its hinges as Thomas kicked it clean off. The vehicle was still in motion as he leapt out, shouting over his shoulder, Catch up if you can! Then he was gone, tearing down the street like a missile, debris flying in his wake. In the car, the other hunters exchanged weary glances. Well, one muttered, there go the damage reports. Another city block down, the other sighed. He could have just waited. Bam! Jinwoo's fist slammed into Dong-su's torso with a concussive force that rippled through the air. The man's body flew across the factory, crashing into steel beams with a sickening crunch. The 2 men flanking Jin-ho panicked, stumbling backward in fear. Jinwoo stood still, breathing hard, fury radiating from him in waves. Jin-ho, bloodied and broken, stirred slightly. His blurry vision focused just enough to see Jinwoo standing over him. Protector, savior. Relief flickered in his eyes. Without wasting a second, Jinwoo pulled a healing potion from his inventory and poured it into Jin-ho's mouth, hands trembling. Warning, target HP below 10%. Potion ineffective. The bottle shattered in Jinwoo's clenched fist. Rage flared hotter. There had to be another way. His eyes snapped to the terrified men nearby. One of you? Are you a healer?" They froze, faces pale. The taller one stammered, I'm not, I can't." Jinwoo's gaze sharpened like a blade. Time was slipping through his fingers, and Jinho's life was hanging by a thread. Dong-su, still reeling from Jinwoo's devastating blow, finally steadied himself. Wiping blood from his mouth, he forced a smirk and broke the silence. "I don't speak Korean, you know," he said in English, pretending the tension was nothing more than an awkward first meeting. "Mind filling me in?" Jinwoo didn't even glance at him. His eyes remained locked on the two hunters. His voice, low and sharp, cut through the room like a blade. "Heal him. Now." The tension thickened. One of the hunters, clearly the healer, chuckled arrogantly. "Why don't you ask my boss first?" he said, nodding toward Dong-su. "Maybe if he says please." That was all Jinwoo needed to hear. Crack. The healer's head hit the ground with such force it echoed. No one had seen Jinwoo move. One blink, and he was already standing over the second hunter. "Can you heal?" The man barely had time to stammer before he too was slammed face first into the floor. The factory fell deathly silent, broken only by the ragged breaths of a barely conscious Jinho. The air was heavy, oppressive. Dong-su stepped forward slowly, anger radiating from him. "What did you do to my brother?" he demanded, voice rising with accusation. Jinwoo didn't flinch. Behind him, Jinho stirred and weakly murmured, "Jinwoo, that's Hwang Dong-su." Jinwoo raised a hand to quiet him. "Don't speak." Dong-su's voice cracked like thunder, his fury erupting. "Answer me. Did you kill him? Did you kill my brother and his team?" Jinwoo's gaze turned icy, calm, dangerous. "Why don't you ask your brother yourself?" That did it. Dong-su's aura exploded as he lunged forward, his fist glowing with raw power aimed at Jinwoo's face. But Jinwoo effortlessly ducked the blow and countered with a brutal punch to Dong-su's gut. Boom! The force launched Dong-su across the factory, his body slamming into the pipes with a deafening crash. He gasped, doubled over, unable to comprehend what just happened. Jinwoo was already on him. In an instant, he was crouched over Dong-su, his fist a blur. Bam! Bam! Dong-su's screams rang out as Jinwoo pounded him into the floor, blood splattering across the concrete. With one hand, Jinwoo gripped Dong-su's head, crushing what resistance remained. Then, boom! The roof above them exploded inward as a massive figure descended like a meteor. Thomas Andre had arrived. The ground quaked from his landing, dust swirling as his golden aura radiated outward. His gaze immediately snapped to the scene in front of him. "Enough!" he said, voice like steel. "Jinwoo, stop!" He turned to Dong-su, battered and nearly unrecognizable. "I told you not to touch him. Are you still alive?" Jinwoo didn't release his grip. His tone was cold. "Barely." Thomas stepped forward, hands raised. "Let him go. Do that, and I'll pretend I didn't see any of this." Jinwoo's eyes narrowed. "And if I don't?" The tension spiked. Thomas's smile faded. "Then this isn't a request anymore." Dong-su, broken and bleeding, used what little strength he had left. "Kill him," he hissed. "Finish what I couldn't." Without a word, Jinwoo slammed his fist down one last time, knocking Dong-su out cold. His body went limp, lifeless in every way except breath. Jinwoo stood slowly and turned to face Thomas fully. "Fine by me." The room stilled. Two apex predators staring each other down. Thomas, towering with presence and power, narrowed his eyes. "Do you even know who I am?" Jinwoo's gaze never wavered. "I don't care." For a long moment, Thomas studied him. There was no fear, no hesitation. Jinwoo knew exactly who he was up against, and still didn't flinch. It had been a long time since anyone looked at Thomas Andre like that. He thought back to his roots, a poor immigrant kid who clawed his way to the top, who crushed enemies and earned his place with sheer strength. But now, standing before Jinwoo, for the first time in years, he wasn't sure he had the upper hand. Violence had always been Thomas Andre's answer. It was the language he spoke fluently, honed through countless battles and sharpened by victory after victory. Power was justice. Power was law. And Thomas, with his unmatched strength, had never needed permission to impose either. Anyone who defied him fell. Those who disrespected him learned to kneel. He ruled through brute force, with authority, wealth, and fear wrapped tightly around his fists like armor. And now, staring down a man who dared to stand against him, Thomas knew exactly how to respond. Time seemed to freeze as he launched forward, a human missile of fury and muscle. "Blame your ignorance," he roared, "for what's about to happen." Just then, crash! Something thundered through the factory wall at lightning speed, pulverizing concrete and metal as it blasted into the building. It skidded across the floor, gouging deep furrows, and came to a screeching halt right in front of the newly arrived Scavenger Guild hunters. They froze, stunned, not by what they saw, but by who. Thomas Andre, their invincible guildmaster, lay sprawled across the cracked floor, his body steaming from the impact. "Guildmaster!" they cried, rushing to him. He slowly pushed himself to his feet, waving them off. His face was twisted with fury, his pride bruised more than his body. Not even acknowledging their concern, he stormed back toward the ruins of the factory, every step radiating rage. The vice guildmaster snapped the others into action. Orders flew. Hunters scrambled. The storm had just begun. Inside, Jinwoo stood still, calm amidst the wreckage. At his side, the winged wyvern Kaisel and the crimson-armored knight Igris waited, loyal and alert. Igris gently lifted the unconscious Jinho from the ground, as if handling something sacred. "Take him to the nearest hospital," Jinwoo ordered. "Don't stop until he's safe." Igris nodded. With Kaisel's wings spread wide, they soared skyward, vanishing into the horizon. Back in the factory, the ground began to tremble again. The rest of the Scavenger Guild had arrived, nearly 100 elite hunters, the most powerful force on the planet, now standing at Thomas Andre's back. Each one radiated confidence and power, their auras lighting up the battlefield like a storm of stars. Jinwoo responded in kind. Shadows stretched and curled from beneath his feet, thick as smoke and darker than night. One by one, his soldiers emerged, an army of deathless warriors, loyal and unyielding. The factory filled with a cold, unnatural stillness. Thomas grinned. For the first time in years, he felt alive. The insult with Dongsu was forgotten. This was about pride now, about dominance, about proving who stood at the top. Thomas stepped forward and gave one final warning. "Admit you were wrong. Apologize. Walk away, and I'll let you live." Jinwoo didn't speak. He simply raised his middle finger. Thomas's face twisted with rage. His shirt tore away as his muscles swelled, hardening like steel. A terrifying energy burst from beneath his feet, shaking the earth as his transformation completed. His full strength was unleashed, a monstrous force of raw, unfiltered power. Behind him, his elite hunters stood ready. Across the field, Iron raised his weapon high. Jinwoo's shadow army surged behind him, an endless tide of darkness, awaiting only his command. "Advance," Jinwoo said quietly. The order dropped like a hammer. His soldiers charged, a relentless wall of shadows. In response, the scavenger hunters raised their golden shields, their magic flaring bright as they formed a shimmering barrier. Then, impact. The two forces collided in a cataclysmic eruption. The ground quaked. Magic tore through the air. The screams of battle and the clash of steel echoed in every direction. Thomas didn't wait. He tore through the battlefield like a wrecking ball, scattering shadows in all directions. His path was clear. Jinwoo. Tusk rose to stop him, growing to monstrous size, arms spread wide as he summoned a radiant barrier with a booming hymn of protection. Thomas didn't stop. He stomped the ground, launched into the air, and met Tusk mid-flight. With one horrifying motion, he seized the massive shadow by the head and ripped it off. Landing atop the factory, he crashed through the roof, descending into the building like a meteor. Inside, the sight that greeted him was grim. His hunters were losing. Shadow soldiers overran them, one after another. The elite scavenger guild overwhelmed. Thomas clenched his fists. This wasn't just a fight anymore. It was war. Jinwoo stood amid the chaos, his presence calm and commanding. His gaze shifted toward Thomas, who wasted no time and charged forward once again, determination burning in his eyes. With lightning-fast reflexes, Thomas shoved iron aside, breaking through the front lines of Jinwoo's shadow soldiers, his eyes scanning the battlefield for his target. Suddenly, a blur of motion from his side caught his attention. He turned just in time, but it was already too late. In an instant, Jinwoo struck, aiming the demon monarch's dagger at Thomas's waist. However, despite the weapon's razor-sharp edge, it barely made a dent in Thomas's hardened skin. Jinwoo's eyes widened in shock, realizing the strength of his opponent. Before he could react, Thomas retaliated. His fist shot forward with tremendous force, landing squarely on Jinwoo. The blow sent Jinwoo hurtling through the air, crashing upward with the sheer might of the impact. Thomas grinned, unshaken by the strike. He taunted Jinwoo, questioning whether the younger hunter truly dared to look down on a national-level hunter. Then, with a sudden shift, a powerful gravitational force emanated from Thomas. It felt as though an invisible fist had wrapped around Jinwoo, yanking him toward Thomas. Jinwoo's eyes widened as he realized what was happening: psychokinesis. Thomas extended his hand, boasting that Jinwoo should now feel the difference in their strengths and despair at the overwhelming power. The distance between them closed rapidly as Jinwoo was dragged toward Thomas, but Jinwoo wasn't one to back down easily. He activated ruler's authority, using his immense strength to slam down on Thomas, forcing the giant to strain under the pressure. Thomas, shocked, realized Jinwoo wasn't merely resisting the pull, he was fighting back with a force that fixed Thomas in place. Even as he was dragged closer, Jinwoo seized the moment. With lightning speed, he delivered a devastating punch to Thomas's face. The impact was explosive, and for the first time in his career as a hunter, the man known as Goliath bled. Blood trickled from Thomas's lip, torn open by Jinwoo's punch, causing him to stagger backward in surprise. Jinwoo didn't give him a chance to recover. He closed the distance in a flash, his hand coiled back, ready to strike again. As he moved, his voice rang out with mockery, asking Thomas what had happened to his earlier boasts about strength and despair. Without hesitation, Jinwoo unleashed a flurry of punches, each one landing with precision and overwhelming force. Thomas, stunned and battered, could hardly react to the relentless onslaught. Finally, the towering hunter admitted to himself that he had underestimated Jinwoo. His golden eyes flared with intensity, and with a growl, he called for reinforcements. His already massive muscles swelled even further, his body growing beyond 3 meters tall, a living embodiment of raw power. With a furious roar, he unleashed his newfound strength, hoping to turn the tide of the battle. Meanwhile, at the Hunter Command Center, a convoy of vehicles sped toward the battlefield, carrying elite hunters toward the escalating confrontation. Inside one of the vehicles, an S-rank hunter grew impatient, demanding answers from Adam White. Adam, however, remained focused on the task at hand, his voice laced with urgency as he replied that there was no time for explanations. The other hunter, sensing the danger that lay ahead, warned that they were about to enter a life-threatening situation. As the battle raged on, Jinwoo's thoughts raced, his mind sharp and calculating. He had recognized a crucial detail. 4 humans had wielded the power of the rulers, those who had survived the Kamish raid. Among them stood Thomas Andre, a national-level hunter. Facing the towering figure before him, Jinwoo's instincts screamed danger. He knew this fight would push him beyond his limits, but his intuition had never failed him, and it urged him to act fast. Just as Thomas moved to strike, Jinwoo's reflexes kicked in. He skidded to a halt and leaped back, narrowly avoiding the earth-shattering blow. Thomas's fist slammed into the ground with enough force to send shockwaves rippling outward. The ground cracked and debris flew, creating a storm of destruction around the impact zone. The skill demolish was a testament to Thomas's terrifying strength as everything within its radius shattered like fragile glass. Jinwoo took several more steps back, realizing the sheer devastating power Thomas wielded, even at a safe distance. Before Jinwoo could process his shock, Thomas summoned an even greater force. With a deafening roar, he unleashed an incredible gravitational pull, like a black hole, dragging everything around him toward the center. Hunters and shadow soldiers alike screamed in terror as they were pulled toward Thomas. Jinwoo felt the overwhelming force but used his ruler's authority to counteract the pull, leaping back to avoid being sucked in. Without his power, he would have been caught like the others. But Thomas wasn't finished. He unleashed another devastating shockwave with his demolish skill, ripping through the air and sending both allies and enemies flying in every direction. The chaos escalated as the battlefield crumbled under the force of Thomas's power. The Vice Guildmaster, realizing the imminent danger, shouted orders, urging his hunters to retreat and move the injured to safety. A handful of agile hunters swiftly pulled their wounded comrades out of the devastation's path. Amid the chaos, Jinwoo's instincts never faltered. He leaped again, narrowly dodging another destructive strike from Thomas. The sheer power of the blow created a massive crater where Thomas stood. Jinwoo landed on the rubble, crouching just in time to avoid further damage. Thomas, towering in the pit, glared at Jinwoo, his rage burning in his eyes. Without a second's hesitation, he charged forward, his speed terrifying. As a national-level hunter, Thomas viewed himself as a king, and he would make Jinwoo pay for challenging him. However, Jinwoo had other plans. As Thomas closed in, Jinwoo launched a powerful kick, striking the top of Thomas's head with brutal force. The impact sent the colossal hunter crashing down, but Jinwoo wasn't finished. He descended upon Thomas with relentless intent. In mid-air, Thomas reached out, activating his capture skill again. A massive gravitational pull latched onto Jinwoo, but Jinwoo didn't retreat. Instead, he used ruler's authority to accelerate his momentum, closing the distance between them at incredible speed. Thomas, momentarily thrown off by Jinwoo's strategy, widened his eyes in disbelief. Jinwoo wasn't evading the attack. He was pulling Thomas toward him with greater force. In a desperate move, Thomas activated reinforcement, swelling his muscles as his power surged. The collision of their fists was a thunderous explosion of mana, the impact so intense that it shattered Thomas's armor. Despite the overwhelming power Thomas unleashed, Jinwoo ducked under the punch and countered with a brutal strike of his own. Thomas was sent flying, his body like a missile, as he crashed through factory towers and skidded to a halt, carving a deep trench in the ground. Jinwoo landed smoothly, his eyes cold and focused as he watched his opponent struggle to rise. Thomas roared in pain, battered and bruised, but Jinwoo wasn't done. Without hesitation, he charged forward again. Struggling to push himself up, Thomas was met with Jinwoo standing directly in front of him. The towering hunter swung his fist with all his might, each strike ripping through the air, leaving shockwaves strong enough to leave holes in the ground. His punches were deadly, capable of obliterating anything they touched. But Jinwoo's agility was unmatched. He dodged every attack, his movements fluid and swift. In the blink of an eye, he retaliated, landing devastating blows on Thomas's vulnerable spots. Each strike from Jinwoo hit with precision, each knee crashing into Thomas's body with unrelenting force. The battlefield shook with the sound of every impact as Jinwoo's assault became an unstoppable storm. Meanwhile, several vehicles screeched to a halt at a safe distance from the fight, their passengers aware of the sheer magnitude of the battle unfolding before them. Inside one of the vehicles, Brent and an S-rank hunter felt the enormous magical energy radiating from the battlefield. The raw power emanating from the combatants was far beyond that of any normal hunter. The danger was palpable, and Brent braced himself for what was to come. Suddenly, a figure flew through the air and crashed violently into the ground, sending tremors across the area. Adam's face turned pale as he recognized the figure Thomas Andre, one of the strongest hunters in the world, had been thrown aside with an overwhelming display of strength. Brent, filled with disbelief, struggled to comprehend the turn of events. Thomas Andre, the invincible national-level hunter, was being overpowered by none other than Sung Jinwoo. As the beating continued, doubts crept into Thomas's mind. The idea of losing seemed impossible. His violence, his raw power, had always been his defining trait. But now, here he was, struggling to maintain his ground. Blood stained his teeth, and fury twisted his features. Madness burned in his eyes as he struggled to stay on his feet. But Jinwoo didn't stop. His fist collided with Thomas's chin, sending a tremor through the giant's body. Even as Thomas shook his head, trying to recover, Jinwoo was already there. His attacks were relentless, a storm of precision and power. Each strike shattered Thomas's once impenetrable defense. The once mighty Goliath was faltering, staggering under the weight of Jinwoo's assault. But Thomas roared in defiance, his voice filled with fury. "I am Thomas Andre. You can't take me down." Jinwoo didn't flinch. His cold gaze remained locked on Thomas. "I told you, didn't I? It doesn't matter who you are." With a final elbow strike, Jinwoo hammered Thomas's head down. The battle had reached its peak, and Thomas could barely stand against Jinwoo's relentless assault. Blood sprayed with each hit, and it became clear. Thomas Andre was crumbling under the might of Jinwoo's sheer force. At that moment, Adam rushed onto the battlefield, desperate to intervene. His voice echoed across the battlefield, pleading for the fight to stop. Jinwoo, however, showed no sign of stopping. His face remained cold and focused, each strike fueled by an overwhelming sense of rage. The force of his blows sent Thomas reeling, his once imposing figure faltering under the relentless barrage. As Jinwoo readied another devastating punch to finish the battle, Thomas, barely conscious, managed to part his lips in surrender, a quiet admission that the fight was over. His body went limp, signaling his defeat. Without hesitation, Jinwoo held his fist mid-air, the storm of strikes momentarily ceasing. Standing over Thomas's broken form, Jinwoo allowed the silence to stretch, his expression unreadable. The onlookers were left in shock, unable to fathom what they had just witnessed. Thomas Andre, a symbol of unrivaled strength and a national-level hunter, was now reduced to a shattered figure on the ground. The once invincible hunter lay at Jinwoo's feet, and for the first time, the world saw Thomas Andre's fragility. As the realization set in, it was clear that this battle would leave its mark on history. The news of Jinwoo's victory would send shockwaves across the globe, reshaping the perception of hunters and power. Adam White, ever quick to respond, immediately called for healers. A high-ranking healer arrived at Thomas's side, checking his vitals and casting healing magic. The healer's face fell as he assessed the damage. Thomas's body was nearly destroyed, bones shattered, blood pouring from his wounds. Despite the healer's best efforts, it became apparent that more was needed. He called for backup, and soon a team of healers surrounded Thomas, working together to save the national-level hunter. They marveled at his resilience, noting that his survival was a testament to his indomitable will. No other hunter could have lasted so long against such catastrophic injuries. While the healers worked tirelessly, the staff of the Hunter Command Center focused on evacuating the wounded. The Scavenger Guild's elite hunters were in critical condition, their groans and cries of pain echoing through the ruined factory. Broken limbs, unconscious bodies, and scattered debris painted a grim picture of the aftermath. Adam White, watching it all unfold, felt a heavy weight on his chest. Given the severity of the situation, this might have been the best possible outcome. Thomas Andre was alive, but the devastation was undeniable. Just as he was absorbing the scale of the destruction, a voice pulled Adam from his thoughts. He groaned, bracing himself for more bad news. A hunter approached, face ashen, delivering a crushing blow. Huang Dongsu was dead. No breath, no pulse. Adam's gaze swept across the battlefield. But his unease grew when he noticed something else. There was no sign of Sung Jinwoo. The battlefield was left in ruins, but the hunter responsible for it had already vanished, leaving only the echoes of his confrontation. Back in Seoul, South Korea, Jinwoo sat silently atop a towering building, gazing at the city below. Using shadow exchange, he had swapped places with Baru, returning to Korea while Baru tended to Jinho's injuries in his stead. It had been some time since Jinwoo had been back, and as he took in the familiar sight of Seoul, memories from his past flooded him. Meanwhile, in the United States, Baru was doing his best to heal Jinho, his efforts focused and unwavering. As time passed, one of Jinwoo's shadow soldiers approached. The soldier, a knight commander in rank, knelt before Jinwoo, humbly requesting a name. Jinwoo shifted his gaze to the soldier, intrigued by the request. The soldier had once been Hwang Dong-soo, a man undone by his own greed, and it was this very flaw that had led to his downfall. Jinwoo considered this for a moment, a faint, bitter smile tugging at his lips. He thought it fitting to bestow a name that would forever remind Dong-soo of his past, of the greed that had ultimately claimed his life. "Your name will be Greed," Jinwoo said. The former Hwang Dong-soo, now Greed, bowed low in gratitude, his voice full of submission. "Thank you, Master." Jinwoo turned his attention back to the cityscape of Seoul, his eyes unwavering as he prepared for whatever would come next.